It's a beautiful day. Peggy.
Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and distinguished guests. I love listening to an engaging speaker. And before Toastmasters, I didn't realize how much time and effort goes into preparing such a great speech. I think one of our greatest tools is that we as Toastmasters, when we're learning our speeches and practicing our speeches, is that we allow our audience, we give our audience permission to evaluate us. Now, one of the reasons I joined Toastmasters is because I want to be able to give speeches for my family and friends in celebration. Larry Wilson and I, we've worked together now for over 20 years. And he was my direct supervisor for 8 years. And when he got his promotion, we threw him a party. And at this party, people were standing up and telling little stories about themselves and Larry, wishing him well. And I sat there, I could not get up and say anything. But now that I'm in Toastmasters, I received a new opportunity to speak. And that was to speak at my daughter's 8th grade graduation party. Now, this was very exciting for me, and also very intimidating. Oh, sure, they're my friends and family and they love me, but they're not my Toastmasters audience. And so I didn't tell anybody I was going to give a speech, so I always could back out. And so I was going to, and then I wasn't going to. And then I remember speaking to some of my fellow Toastmasters, and they were saying, you have to step out of your comfort zone to grow. And so I knew I needed to do this. And of course, this is something that I wanted to do for my daughter. And so we had a party for her. It was at a small restaurant. There was 30 people there. And after lunch, I asked my oldest son, to introduce me. He introduces me. I step onto my pretend stage. And I look out to my audience. And one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to make eye contact with everybody. And so as I'm looking around my audience, I see my cousin, and her eyes are already welling up with tears. And I began my speech. I said, my Megan, she is 14 years old, and we are all here celebrating her 8th grade graduation. Have you ever asked yourself, where does the time go? I ask myself that more often than not lately, because I now have 2 children in high school and 1 in college. If I were to close my eyes, in a moment, I could be back to the day that my daughter was born, and it was a beautiful day. I remember talking to my grandmother on the front porch and talking about the day that my father was born, and she would say, Peggy, the day your father was born, it was a beautiful day. And then I started thinking, I don't know what the weather was the day that Megan was born. I got into the hospital at 5 in the morning, and 8 o'clock at night she was born. So really, I don't know if it was a beautiful day. And then I was thinking, perhaps my grandmother wasn't speaking of the weather. Perhaps she was speaking that any day a baby is born, it is a beautiful day. So some of the things that you may not know about Megan loves to write notes. And when she was little, we would get notes all the time from her. She would say that she loved me with her big, big heart. And she would say that she loved that when we tucked her in. But as she grew older, she also started writing letters to non-family members. And if she were to write you a letter, it would be between her and you. And only by accident do I run across some of these letters. And it was one letter that she wrote to her 5th grade teacher. Her 5th grade teacher, I saw her in the hallway. We spoke very briefly, and she said, oh, and by the way, I love the letter that Megan wrote me. And I said, what letter is that? So she brought me to her office, and she allowed me to read the letter. The letter said that normally she didn't like social studies, but she was very happy that her teacher took extra effort to research the subject to make it more interesting for the students. And then at the end, she wrote in big letters, thank you for being a great teacher. And so the teacher held the letter up to me and said to me, this is what teaching is all about. Another thing about Megan is that another thing about Megan is that in 2005, she had a project. So she's only 8 years old. And the project was she had to say why she was thankful for her parents. And I could not believe, my husband and I could not believe how eloquent she was when she wrote. Like she understood everything that we did for her. And I'd love to share this with you. She wrote, I am thankful for my parents. They give me food and water. And they give me a treat when I am grown. And so at the end of my speech, I asked my daughter to step up beside me. And I held her, I gave her a hug, and I said, the greatest compliment that I could give you is that if I were not your mother, I would choose you as a friend. And today is another beautiful day. And so at the end, everybody clapped. And so it was very nice. I was talking, my mom came up to me and she said, Peggy, she goes, I really liked your speech, you did a nice job. She goes, however, you really weren't talking to our side of the audience. And I said, really? Because I meant to. I thought I was. And she's like, no. I go, well, could you hear me? And she said, we could hear you. And I said, okay. I go, thanks, Mom. And then I thought about it. I gave my mother permission to evaluate me, and I grew from that evaluation. So, Mr. Toastmaster.